Area ladies, God bless them, burst into action. Within minutes, they were serving slices of questionable pepperoni pizza to bikers who acted like it was five-star cuisine. The brothers, who couldn't fit at Celeste's table, spread out to other empty tables, filling the cafeteria with their presence. And slowly, carefully, Celeste started to smile. Really smile. The kind of smile that transforms a face, that erases years of pain for just a moment. "Thank you for coming," she whispered to Johnny. "Thank you for inviting me," he said. "Nobody should eat alone. Not in America. Not anywhere." But across the cafeteria, Kyle Henderson was watching, and he was about to make the biggest mistake of his 9-year-old life. Kyle Henderson had never been in a situation he couldn't talk his way out of. His father owned the biggest car dealership between Anchorage and Fairbanks. His mother was on the school board, and his family donated generously to Glacier Elementary's PTA. That combination meant Kyle operated with a certain immunity. Teachers looked the other way, administrators made excuses, and other kids feared him more than they liked him. But watching 50 bikers fill his school cafeteria and sit with the monster like she was somebody important, that was unacceptable. He stood up from his table, ignoring Brandon's hissed warning to sit back down. Kyle walked across the cafeteria with the confidence of a kid who'd never been told no, who'd never faced consequences, who genuinely believed the world bent to his will. He stopped 3 feet from Celeste's table. Every biker turned to look at him. The temperature in the room dropped. "Why are you here?" Kyle asked, his voice carrying across the silent cafeteria. "She's just the monster. She doesn't need protection." Johnny set down his pizza slice very carefully. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that's more terrifying than shouting. "What's your name, son?" "Kyle Henderson. My dad owns Henderson Auto Group. He's the biggest—" "I don't care if your dad owns Alaska," Johnny interrupted. "I asked your name because I want to remember it. Now let me ask you something else. Do you know what a monster is?" Kyle faltered. This wasn't going how he'd expected. It's something scary. Something wrong. Interesting." Johnny stood up, and suddenly Kyle understood how gazelles feel when they realize the lion is hungry. "See, I thought monsters were people who hurt others for fun, people who pick on someone smaller, weaker, different, people who make a 6-year-old girl feel like she doesn't deserve to exist." He took 1 step closer. "That sound like anyone you know?" Kyle's confidence was evaporating fast. He looked around for support, from his friends, from teachers, from anyone. But everyone was watching with expressions that ranged from satisfied to horrified to fascinated. "I was just joking," Kyle said, his voice smaller now. "Everyone jokes." "Everyone?" Johnny turned to the cafeteria at large. "How many of you have called Celeste names? How many of you made fun of her arm, her scars, her accent?" Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. "See, here's the thing about jokes," Torch said, standing up to join Johnny. He was less intimidating than the president, but still 6'2" of former Marine. "Jokes are supposed to make people laugh. If the person you're joking about is crying, it's not a joke. It's cruelty, and we don't tolerate cruelty." Tiny stood up next, all 6'6", 320 pounds of him. "You know what Celeste is? She's a survivor. She survived a war. She survived losing her parents. She survived injuries that would break most adults. And then she survived months of you making her life hell. That makes her the toughest person in this room, including us." Kyle was shaking now. I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "You meant it," Johnny said. "But here's your chance to change. Celeste isn't the monster anymore. She's under our protection. That means she's family. And in our world, you mess with family, you answer to all of us." He gestured to the 50-plus bikers filling the cafeteria. "All of us." Kyle nodded frantically, tears starting to form. He wasn't used to being scared, didn't like the feeling. "Good. Now apologize to her. A real apology." Kyle turned to Celeste, who had been sitting quietly through the entire exchange. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice cracked. "I'm sorry for calling you monster. I'm sorry for being mean. I was wrong." Celeste looked at him for a long moment. Then, in her accented English, she said something that made the entire cafeteria hold its breath. "I forgive you, but don't do it again. I have friends now." She gestured to the bikers surrounding her table, these massive, tattooed men who'd driven across Anchorage to sit with her. And in that moment, Kyle Henderson understood something important. Power isn't about money or status or who your parents are. Power is about having people who'll stand with you when the world turns dark. And Celeste had 53 of them. Kyle went back to his table. The cafeteria slowly returned to normal noise levels, though nobody was quite acting normal. Kids kept stealing glances at the bikers. Teachers were whispering. The news cameras outside were still rolling. Johnny sat back down next to Celeste. "You okay?" She nodded, but then she looked up at him with those big, serious eyes. "Mr. Johnny, are you really my friend now? Forever?" Johnny felt that crack in his chest widen. "Yeah, kiddo, forever. When a biker becomes your friend, they're your friend for life. That's the code. And we never break the code. What if I move away? What if my aunt takes me somewhere else?" "Doesn't matter. Hell's Angels got chapters all over the world. Wherever you go, you tell them you're Reaper's little angel, and they'll take care of you." He reached into his vest and pulled out a small pin, a miniature death head logo, the kind they gave to family members. "This is for you. It means you're protected. You wear this, and every biker in America will know. She's one of ours." Celeste took the pin with trembling fingers. "I'm not a monster anymore?" "You never were, sweetheart. You never were." The aftermath of the cafeteria invasion was immediate and chaotic. Within an hour, the story was on every news channel in Alaska. "Hell's Angels defend bullied refugee," screamed the headlines. The footage showed Johnny and his brothers entering the school, sitting with Celeste, the confrontation with Kyle. It showed Celeste's face lighting up, showed her smiling for the first time in months. By that evening, it had gone national. CNN picked it up. Fox News, MSNBC. Social media exploded. Some people called it a publicity stunt. Others called it vigilantism. But most people, especially parents, veterans, and anyone who'd ever been bullied, called it justice. The Anchorage Hell's Angels clubhouse was flooded with calls. Donations poured in for Celeste's motorized wheelchair. They raised enough money in 48 hours to buy her top-of-the-line equipment. Letters arrived from across the country, from other MC clubs offering support, from military families thanking them for protecting a war refugee, from former bullying victims saying they wished someone had stood up for them. But the most important change happened at Glacier Elementary. On Monday, when Celeste rolled into the cafeteria for lunch, she wasn't alone. Maya Tucker, Torch's teenage daughter, had taken the day off from high school to visit. She sat with Celeste. And suddenly, eating with the refugee girl wasn't social, suicide anymore. It was cool. Because if a high schooler who hung out with bikers thought Celeste was worth knowing, maybe she was. By Tuesday, 3 kids from Celeste's class asked to sit with her. By Wednesday, her table was full. By Friday, Mrs. Patterson had to establish a rotation because too many kids wanted to eat lunch with Celeste. Kyle Henderson stopped making monster noises. In fact, he avoided Celeste entirely, which was fine with everyone. His father, embarrassed by the negative publicity his son had generated, quietly removed his dealership's sponsorship from the school's basketball team. Message received. Principal Vickers called Johnny personally to thank him. A call that must have physically pained the man, but to his credit, he made it. "I should have done more," Vickers admitted. "I let it go on because it was easier than confronting difficult parents. I failed Celeste. You didn't. Thank you." "Don't thank me," Johnny said. "Just do better. For all the kids who need someone to stand up for them." But the real moment that mattered happened 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning. Johnny got a call from Celeste's aunt Miriam. Her English was broken, but her message was clear. Celeste wanted to see him. He rode to their Mountain View apartment, a small 2-bedroom in a building that had seen better days. Miriam answered the door, tears in her eyes. "She talks about you every day. You changed her life." "She changed mine," Johnny said honestly. Celeste was waiting in the living room wearing the Hell's Angels pin on her coat. When she saw Johnny, she smiled. That same transformative smile that erased the pain. "Mr. Johnny, I made you something." She handed him a drawing, much more detailed than the first one. This time it showed a little girl in a wheelchair surrounded by big people on motorcycles. Above them, in careful English, "My family." Johnny's eyes stung. "This is beautiful, Celeste." "I'm not scared anymore," she said quietly. "The kids don't call me monster. They call me Celeste. Some of them even want to be my friend. And it's because you showed them I'm not alone. You're never alone. You got 53 brothers now. More if you count the National Club. That's a lot of family." "Mr. Johnny," she hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything, kiddo." "Why did you help me? You didn't know me. I'm not your real family." Johnny crouched down to her eye level, the way he always did. "You know what I learned in the Army? Family isn't just blood. Family is who stands with you when the world gets dark, who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself, who sees you at your worst and loves you anyway." He tapped the pin on her coat. "You're my family now. And family means forever." Celeste threw her one arm around his neck and hugged him tight. Johnny hugged her back, this broken little girl who'd survived war and found safety in the coldest corner of America, protected by men the world called monsters. Sometimes the monsters are actually the heroes. Sometimes the heroes wear leather and ride Harleys. And sometimes all it takes to change a life is showing up when someone asks for help. As Johnny rode away from that apartment building, the Anchorage winter wind cutting through his leather, he thought about the note that started this all, about the crayon flower and the desperate plea, about how close Celeste had come to giving up entirely. And he thought about all the other kids like her, the bullied, the different, the ones who eat lunch alone while America looks away. The brotherhood couldn't save them all, but they could save some. And that, Johnny realized, was enough. The story should have ended there, with Celeste protected, the bullies silenced, and Johnny finding redemption in the smile of a 6-year-old. But life doesn't wrap up neatly, and neither do biker stories. Because what happened next proved that when you stand up for the vulnerable in America, sometimes the system stands with you, and sometimes it doesn't. 3 weeks after the cafeteria incident, Johnny got a call from a lawyer. Not a threatening call, a surprising one. The lawyer represented a national anti-bullying organization called Stand Together, and they'd seen the news coverage. They wanted to partner with the Anchorage Hells Angels to create a program, Bikers Against Bullying. "We've seen this work in other states," the lawyer explained. "Motorcycle clubs escorting bullied kids to school, providing visible protection, teaching children that real strength means defending the weak. Your story with Celeste is perfect. We want to make it official, make it replicable." Johnny called church. The brothers voted unanimously to participate. Within a month, Bikers Against Bullying Alaska chapter was officially launched. The program was simple. Any bullied kid in the Anchorage area could request an escort to school. The Hells Angels would show up, ride with them, walk them inside. The presence alone stopped most bullying immediately. Nobody wanted to mess with a kid who had biker protection. The first request came from a 12-year-old boy named Aaron, who was being tormented for being gay. The second was a native Alaskan girl named Kira, bullied for her heritage. The third was a white kid named Josh, targeted for being overweight. Race, religion, identity, none of it mattered to the brotherhood. Vulnerable was vulnerable. And vulnerable kids deserved protection. The program exploded. Within 6 months, MC clubs across Alaska had joined. Within a year, it had spread to Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. The national media covered it extensively. The Hells Angels, an organization the FBI had once called a criminal enterprise, were now being praised for community service. Not everyone was happy about it. Some law enforcement agencies remained skeptical. Some parent groups worried about criminal influences on children. Some rival clubs thought the Hells Angels were going soft, trading their outlaw reputation for positive PR. Johnny didn't care. Let them talk. He knew the truth. The brotherhood had always been about protecting their own. Now, their own just included some kids who needed help. But the moment that sealed everything happened 6 months after that first cafeteria lunch. Celeste was invited to speak at a Stand Together national conference in Seattle. Miriam was too nervous to take her alone, so Johnny volunteered to escort them. Torch, Tiny, and Gus came along for backup. And because they'd all grown attached to the little girl who'd changed their chapter's trajectory. The conference was held at the Washington State Convention Center, attended by teachers, administrators, psychologists, and anti-bullying advocates from across the country. Celeste was scheduled to speak for 5 minutes. She was terrified. "I can't do it," she told Johnny backstage, her one hand shaking. "There's too many people." "You survived a war," Johnny reminded her gently. "You survived months of bullying. You survived asking a scary biker for help. You can survive 5 minutes on a stage. What if I forget my words? Then you make up new ones. Or you just tell them the truth, that you were alone and you asked for help and someone showed up. That's all anyone needs to hear." Celeste took a deep breath. She was 7 now, a little taller, a little more confident. The motorized wheelchair gave her independence. The therapy Miriam finally had money for was helping with the trauma. But most importantly, she knew she wasn't alone anymore. She rolled onto that stage, and 2,000 people fell silent. "My name is Celeste," she said into the microphone, her accent still present but her voice steady. "When I came to America, I thought I would be safe. but the kids at school called me monster because I lost my arm in a war. They said I was ugly. They said I didn't belong. The audience was riveted. I wanted to die. I thought maybe the bomb should have killed me too with my parents, but then I met Mr. Johnny. He's a biker. He has tattoos and he looks scary. But when I asked him to be my friend, he said yes. He brought 53 friends to eat lunch with me, and after that, nobody called me monster anymore. She paused, looking out at the crowd. People think bikers are bad, but they saved my life. They showed me that real Americans protect people who need help. They showed me that family isn't just blood. It's who stands with you when everything is dark. She held up her arm, the only one she had, and on her wrist was a leather bracelet Johnny had given her, stamped with the Hells Angels' death head. This means I'm protected, forever. And I want every kid who's being bullied to know you can find your own Mr. Johnny. You can find people who will stand with you. You just have to be brave enough to ask. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. People were crying, tough-looking educators, hardened child psychologists, advocates who'd seen everything. Because Celeste's story wasn't just about one little girl being saved. It was about what America could be when people chose to stand up instead of look away. Backstage, Johnny hugged her tight. "You did good, little angel. You did so good." "Mr. Johnny?" Celeste looked up at him. "Do you think my parents would be proud of me?" Johnny's throat closed up. He thought about his own demons, about the years he'd spent thinking he was unredeemable, about how this one little girl had given him purpose. "Baby girl, your parents sent you to America so you could have a better life. Look at you now, speaking in front of thousands, helping other kids, showing the whole country what bravery looks like. They're not just proud, they're in awe." Celeste smiled. Then she said something that Johnny would remember for the rest of his life. "I think maybe I was always supposed to meet you. Maybe that's why I survived the bomb, so I could find my American family. Sometimes redemption comes from unexpected places. Sometimes the monsters are actually the heroes. And sometimes a 6-year-old refugee in a wheelchair teaches a room full of bikers what it truly means to be brave." Johnny Kern had spent his life being feared, being called dangerous, being treated like someone society needed protection from. But Celeste had seen the truth. He wasn't dangerous to the innocent. He was dangerous to anyone who hurt them. And that, in the end, was the whole point of the brotherhood. 2 years later, Celeste turned 9 years old. Her English was fluent now, her wheelchair skills expert level. The scars on her face had faded slightly, though they'd never disappear completely. She didn't mind them anymore. They were part of her story. Proof she'd survived. The birthday party was held at the Anchorage Hells Angels clubhouse because where else would it be? 53 bikers showed up, plus their families, plus Celeste's classmates. Because yes, she had friends now, real friends who invited her to sleepovers and birthday parties and didn't treat her like she was made of glass. Johnny stood in the corner watching Celeste laugh with Maya Tucker and 2 girls from her class. She was wearing a pink dress and the Hells Angels pin, a combination that somehow worked perfectly. The motorized wheelchair was decorated with streamers. The cake was enormous. "You did this," Sarah said, slipping her hand into Johnny's. His wife had watched him transform over the past 2 years, watched the bitterness and anger get replaced by something softer, something purposeful. "She did this," Johnny corrected. "She was brave enough to ask for help. All I did was show up." "Don't sell yourself short, Reaper. You changed that little girl's life. And you changed this club, Look around." Johnny did. The clubhouse was full of children, kids from the Bikers Against Bullying program, sons and daughters of members, even some of the reformed bullies who'd learned their lesson at Glacier Elementary. The Hells Angels, the organization that the media loved to demonize, had become a sanctuary for vulnerable kids across Alaska. Celeste noticed Johnny watching and rolled over, a piece of cake in her hand. "Mr. Johnny, I have something for you." She handed him an envelope. Inside was a drawing. She still loved to draw, but this one was different. It showed a little girl standing, not in a wheelchair, just standing, with 2 arms, 2 legs, smiling. Next to her was a tall man with a beard, and around them were dozens of motorcycles. "This is what I see when I dream," Celeste explained. "In my dreams, I still have both arms. I can run and play like the other kids. But you're always there, protecting me. You're always in my dreams, Mr. Johnny." Johnny couldn't speak. The lump in his throat was too big. "My aunt says dreams are messages from people who love us. So maybe my parents sent you to me. Maybe they knew I needed a new father in America, and they picked you." Celeste's eyes were serious. "Is that okay? Can you be my American father?" Johnny knelt down, not caring that his 53 brothers were watching, not caring that his wife was crying, not caring about anything except this little girl who'd saved him just as much as he'd saved her. "Celeste, it would be the greatest honor of my life." She threw her arm around his neck, and Johnny hugged her back. This war refugee who'd survived bombs and bullying and made it to the other side. This little girl who'd taught a room full of bikers that monsters aren't defined by how scary they look. They're defined by what they do when someone needs help. The party continued around them. Cake was eaten. Presents were opened. The bikers sang Happy Birthday in their gravelly voices, off-key and perfect. And in that moment, in a clubhouse in Anchorage, Alaska, surrounded by leather and chrome and American flags, Celeste wasn't a refugee anymore. She was home. Years from now, when people asked Johnny Kern about his legacy, about what he was proudest of in his life, he wouldn't talk about his Army service. He wouldn't talk about his 20 years in the Hells Angels. He wouldn't talk about the Bikers Against Bullying program that spread across 40 states. He'd talk about a cold afternoon in a parking lot when a 6-year-old girl in a wheelchair handed him a note and asked if he'd sit with her at lunch. Because that moment, that simple, devastating, perfect moment, had changed everything. Sometimes the monsters are actually the heroes. Sometimes the heroes wear leather and ride Harleys. Sometimes all it takes to save a life is showing up when someone asks for help. And sometimes the scariest-looking man in Alaska turns out to have the biggest heart. Celeste had asked if Johnny was scary. He'd said some folks thought so. But the truth, the real truth, that took him 45 years to understand, was this. Being scary isn't about how you look. It's about what you do with the power you have. Johnny Kern looked scary. But he used that power to protect a little girl from the real monsters, the bullies, the indifferent adults, the system that would have let her suffer in silence. That made him a hero. That made him family. That made him exactly what Celeste had always needed, someone who showed up. As the party wound down and families started heading home, Celeste rolled up to Johnny one last time. "Mr. Johnny, promise me something." "Anything, little angel. If you ever meet another kid like me, someone who's alone and scared and needs help, promise you'll show up for them too. Promise you'll be their monster." Johnny smiled, this weathered biker with the kind eyes and the protective fury. "Baby girl, that's not a promise. That's a guarantee. That's what the Brotherhood does. We show up. Always. Celeste smiled and rolled away to rejoin her friends, this 9-year-old who'd survived war and found family in the most unexpected place. And Johnny watched her go, his heart full, his purpose clear. He'd been called a monster his whole life. Fine. If being a monster meant protecting kids like Celeste, he'd wear that label with pride. Because the real monsters? They were the ones who hurt children and walked away. The ones who saw suffering and looked away. The ones who had power and used it for cruelty instead of protection. Johnny Kern wasn't that kind of monster. He was the other kind. The kind that little kids asked to sit with them at lunch. The kind that made bullies back down and cowards reconsider. The kind that proved every single day that leather and tattoos and Harley-Davidsons don't make you dangerous. Choosing to stand up when everyone else stays sitting, that's what makes you dangerous. And in Anchorage, Alaska, the Hells Angels were the most dangerous people around, because they never, ever let a child suffer alone. If you believe that real monsters aren't the ones who look scary, they're the ones who hurt the vulnerable and walk away, hit that like button and share Celeste's story. Subscribe now for more stories that prove bikers are this country's last line of defense when the system fails the innocent. Also, check out the 2 videos showing on the screen right now, specially crafted for you.